Hi, I'm Leah and you're watching Creativity Over Quality. This is part 2 of making my utility belt. I'll show you a couple of stitching techniques, put on all the pockets and show you how to make this nödlösning that you see here. Let's start. Now where were we? Right, lids for the pockets. I want to close them with a loop that goes through a hole and then a piece through the loop, so I start with the holes. Then of course I want to embroider the lids as well. Nothing too intricate, just stripes to give them a leafy feel. I start by marking out where I'm gonna stitch the lid to the background. Then I mark out the stripes. I want all the stripes to tilt at the same angle, so I use the first line as a guide to make marks for the others. I want a 1.5 centimeters distance between my stripes. Then I punch all holes with a stitching chisel. And repeat the process for the other lids. And now embroidery time. As before, I go one step back in the front, fasten my thread, and then 2 steps forward in the back. And then, after fastening what feels like a million threads, we're done. Now doesn't that look nice? 3 little leafy lids. I place them with a simple saddle stitch. So as before we use 2 needles. Push the thread through the needle, then needle through the thread 2 times so we don't have to worry about the thread slipping out. Start on the second hole and go back 1 to secure the thread, and then just sew along. If you want to know how to make the embroidered leaf, you should go watch part 1. These are the gussets, the pocket walls. They should have holes down the long edges, not the short ones. And remember that the distance to the edge can be as small as the distance between the tines of the fork, so you don't need to leave much room there. These are the fronts of my pockets. Make holes down all edges except for the top one, of course. Here I use a stitch that I don't know the name for in English. If you do, please tell us in the comments. Anyway, it's called langettsting in Swedish, and I think it's very pretty. You go almost all the way through, and then through the loop. This is my life now. I made the walls a bit longer than I have to be, because that's better than shorter. Now the loops that will go through the holes. The holes are 7.5 centimeters up the lid, and the walls are 3 centimeters wide, so the loop should be 4.5 centimeters down the front of my pocket. I use thick leather strips to make the loops. I punch some holes for stitching. Then of course I bevel edges. Wet the edges and go over them with an edge slicker to give them a nice finish. Since the pieces are so small, we decided to dip dye them. After painting, I soften them up with some leather fat. It contains linseed oil, beeswax, and birch tar. Then I shape them. Now place them where we measured out before and use something to poke through the holes to mark out the stitching holes in the pocket. I use a scratching awl. Remove any seeds that might be laying around before punching holes. Then again a saddle stitch. When you punch holes, be careful that you're only punching through the layer that you want holes in. Now I have 3 choices. 1. Make a new wall. 2. Leave it. Or 3. Cover it up. And I think I'll go with option 2.5. I will pretend that I someday will cover it up and leave it for now. No one will ever know, right? Time to put on the pockets. As usual, it's a saddle stitch, but the first stitch I do in the first hole, and then I go back around the edge of the pocket, ending in the first hole of the lid. glömde sätta på kameran! Since I forgot to turn on the camera, you'll just have to see it when it's done. Now breathe. So you might notice that this video is a bit late. Well, making this video took much more time and energy than I really had, so first I want to say sorry to friends and family for not being available. Also, I want to live a life where I don't let work get in the way of what's really important. So this week I deliberately skipped the deadline to go on a camping trip, and I think you should too. There! Now we're almost done and can start thinking of the closing mechanism. Something I should have thought of before. Oh, you'll see. There is the problem. I thought I was gonna find a big enough clasp, but I didn't. Luckily Quest had another brilliant idea. If you can't see it yet, the idea is to split the belt in 3, put on the clasp and then put it together again with glue and stitching. It's important to not cut with a scissor all the way, because the leather might rip. So first the glue. I measure out how far in I want the contact cement, then spread it out thinly and wait for it to dry. Then I fold it very carefully. Pound it to get rid of any bubbles. I'll stitch a rectangle to make it really secure. And then a simple saddle stitch all around the rectangle. And we're finally done! I'm ridiculously happy with this, even if it took longer than anticipated. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any problems with your projects, you're welcome to ask us questions in the comments or at our Discord server that's accessible through Patreon. Good luck with your projects, and as we say in our hometown, ha det gött, hej!